Let's go!
Come on!
Hallo und herzlich willkommen zum Videogamecast. Diesmal haben wir etwas ganz Besonderes für euch vorbereitet, und zwar unser erstes Interview. Ihr könnt euch vielleicht erinnern, wenn ihr die vorherigen Casts gehört habt, dass wir des Öfteren mal über Digital Foundry reden. Und wir haben uns tatsächlich gedacht, wir fragen doch mal den John Linneman, der vor allem für die DF Retro-Episoden zuständig ist, ob er nicht ein Interview mit uns machen will, und er hat ja gesagt. Deshalb folgt in Kürze ein komplettes Interview über etwa 1,5 Stunden, wo wir über alles Mögliche reden, von Spielesammlungen, wie ist er zu DF oder Digital Foundry gekommen, etc. Allerdings komplett auf Englisch. Deshalb, falls ihr des Englischen nicht mächtig sein solltet, machen wir im Anschluss an diese Episode auch for free eine kurze Zusammenfassung, wo wir nochmal über das Interview reden und so die meisten Punkte einmal ansprechen. John und Digital Foundry findet ihr unter anderem auf deren YouTube-Kanal mit demselben Namen, deren Webseite digitalfoundry.net und dem Twitter-Kanal von John direkt @dark1x oder Digital Foundry auf Twitter @digitalfoundry. Ich wünsche euch nun viel Spaß beim Interview. So, hello, John. Thank you for doing the interview with us.
Absolutely. It's very nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, as we previously said, we're very big fans of Digital Foundry and DF Retro. The 5 episodes we did so far, we probably mentioned you guys about a dozen times already because we're watching along as we do these podcasts. So, yeah, we thought it would be very great to ask you a couple of questions, specifically about DF Retro, but also about your career, how you got to Digital Foundry, and
Sure.
just in general about your, I say, gaming career, if you can say that. Of course, one of the first things is like what brought you into video games as a hobby and as a profession.
Okay, well, as a hobby, it goes back a long way, back to the late 80s for me. I mean, you know, I played lots of games at friends' houses. I had some systems at my house. I think the first system I actually purchased with my own money was an original Game Boy even.
Oh yeah.
From your own money?
I saved up cutting the grass for people. Mowing lawns, which is a very American thing to do, but I got some cash for that, so I was able to get a Game Boy. And I mean, it really just goes back to that period, basically, when I was probably in like 8 or 9 or something like that. That's when I really started to discover it and get into it. So, and for me though, I mean, it kind of started initially with console stuff. So I did miss out on a lot of the older computer stuff, and in the US, of course, things like C64 and a lot of the other micros weren't really popular over there. So, so for me, it was like, the NES, like Nintendo Entertainment System, was a big one to play. I did have an Atari 2600 though, which was kind of a hand-me-down. So I could play a lot of Pitfall on there on a black and white TV. So yeah, that's kind of where it started. And from there, I've been playing since then and slowly building collection. I sold some stuff off in the mid 90s, but since then, I've continued to get stuff. But as far as the profession is concerned, that's because, let's see here, when I moved to Europe in 2013, I quit my job doing, I did a lot of IT work and some programming and other stuff, mainly in the automotive industry. So completely unrelated to, I was working for suppliers, basically. Very different. It was all right, but it was a different thing. But when I quit to follow my wife here, she took an assignment over here again. I basically just kind of applied, I guess you could say, to work with Richard at Digital Foundry because they were looking for help at exactly that time. So I pretty much did that. So I just turned it in, it wasn't even like a typical business interview so much as just like responding to a request for like somebody else to join. And that's what I did.
Okay. So that's how you met Richard?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and do you know Oliver Manitou from Eurogamer?
Yeah, yes, of course.
Okay.
I met him later, of course, but yeah, I know him. I know him now, yes. He's a good dude.
Okay. Yeah, he is. Question about the Game Boy you mentioned earlier. What is your favorite classic Game Boy game?
Oh man, that is really difficult.
It's always the question about the one favorite game about a console collection. Yeah, but let's do it just for the classic Game Boy right now.
Okay, let me think. So the first three that come to mind, and to narrow it down, would be Castlevania 2.
Yeah, Belmont's Revenge, the best one.
Belmont's Revenge. I love that game.
I love it.
And then, of course, I really do love The Legend of Zelda on there. Link's Awakening. That's a great. I played that a lot when I was younger, so I have good memories of that, and it's still a great game. And then number 3, I might want to say something like Wario Land, like Super Mario Land 3. It's another one I played a lot. That's a very beefy game, but I might have to say Castlevania 2 is my favorite in the sense that that's the one I can pop in and play at any point and just start having fun. And I do that. I do that fairly regularly.
Yeah, I have the game in different conditions over here, and it's my favorite game too for the Game Boy.
Oh, yeah. And that soundtrack, man. Oof.
Yeah, and I had the soundtrack for over 10 years as my ringtone for my.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah,
always a classic.
I have my original I have an old copy of it as well, but I also I have still a new in-box version from Japan as well.
Yeah, I have that too, and I have a mint condition European version too.
I don't have a European version. I just have American and Japanese. Which is kind of a theme, as you'll find out. That's one of the reasons I like going to retro trade shows here, because NTSC stuff is typically sold for less. I've gotten some real bargains in Germany, including very cheap copies of Earthworm Jim for Sega CD, and like Rayman for Saturn. I will talk about that later, but there are some deals to be had.
Yeah. I still regret selling off Castlevania Legends on Game Boy. That was the third one.
It's not a great game, but it's good enough, and now it's quite valuable, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Added in the packaging and everything. And
oh man, yeah, no, I made a lot of those mistakes. I sold off a bunch of stuff too from back in the day, usually to fund video cards. But what are you gonna do?
There must have been quite an undertaking moving your whole collection from the US to Germany.
Well, yes and no. Since, with my wife's job, part of that came with a giant moving company that just came and did it all for us. So we didn't really have to do anything. They just came to the house, boxed everything up, took it on a truck, put it on a boat, and then brought it over here and then set everything, they basically got it all back out for us. I mean, I had to reset it up, and that did take time, but
and that's a fun
you're never
part.
quite finished. Yeah, but that's in my opinion, that's one point. You're never finished with setting up your collection.
That's
I'm
true.
always moving stuff around and try to get the best value, the best option, best picture, whatever, best connection, best controller. That's why we made the one episode about video game setups.
Yeah, exactly. I know what you mean. I kind of swap things out. On my retro setup, I have 13 consoles hooked up currently. But sometimes I got to swap some in and out depending on what I'm playing. But most of the main ones are in there.
Okay. What are the main ones?
Oh, sure. I'm looking at them now. So we've got a PlayStation. We've got a Saturn. We've got, I'm not kidding, an Atari Jaguar. We've got a 3DO above that. I've got my PC Engine Duo R with RGB modded, of course. I got the Dreamcast. I have a separate PlayStation 2 because I don't use the PS2 for PlayStation 1 games because there is a difference in video quality. So I use an actual PS1 for playing PS1 games, and I got both of those modded. So because I have so many games from so many different regions, it's a lot easier to, I have multiples of these systems from different regions, but I prefer having one that I can just leave hooked up.
Yeah.
I also have I have Sega, the Genesis / Mega Drive. So an American Genesis with a Sega CD and a 32X on it. I've got a one-chip Super Famicom hooked up with a cart adapter so I can use American carts too. I've got the Analog NT Mini hooked up because that does a lot for that. And then an RGB modded 64. Did I mention the Xbox? I got an Xbox in there.
No.
And then this one's just silly, but I don't have a good place to store it, but it sits under the TV kind of, is I have a CDI. That is not essential, by the way. But it's well, I mean, sometimes I just want to play Thunder in Paradise or something. But,
or Zelda's
but it raises eyebrows, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's mainly if I play anything like that, it'll be like Tetris for CDI because it's like the chilled out version, or something like Burn Cycle. It's usually just to amuse people, like, hey, check this out, it's the CDI, and they're like, what?
What is that?
So yeah,
I
that's
didn't even remember hearing about that in Germany, honestly. Like all those like video consoles, CD player consoles or whatever.
Oh my god, it's a whole weird world, isn't it?
They were always integrated in some kind of video recording system that was CDI enabled, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. CDI is a weird thing. There's a bunch of different versions, but yeah, that's that.
but the whole system sounds a lot like Toby's system, to be honest.
Oh, well, I mean, good taste then.
I mean, I won't claim anything because mainly from your work and other channels that are around right now, I got all the inspiration from them, like with all the video upscaling and stuff. It's been really fun building that up.
Yeah, that is a fun thing. Yeah, actually, when I moved here, I was all using video upscalers, but since coming to Germany, though, I did track down a couple PVMs again, and I really like playing retro games on a CRT. It turns out there is something about it, just the look and feel of it, and you get that extra smooth scrolling with zero blur and everything. It just looks cool to me. So I use them both. I use the upscalers primarily for capturing for episodes, so they're critical to my setup. But I usually play on a CRT.
And there's always that awesome danger that it might blow up in your face.
That's why I keep multiple ones. I have others in storage just in case. But the main one I use is actually a very late model one. It's from like 2004 or something. So it's in pretty good shape. So
yeah, Toby has one too. I don't recall the diameter, the inches. What was it? 19?
No, I think it's a bit bigger, like 21 or something.
Mine's just a 20.
Sorry, John.
It's the 20L4, but I do have
Talking about inches.
I have that extra RGB / component card though, the 129X there.
Oh, the professional one. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No,
I'm a bit behind. I've only the as for upscaling reasons the FrameMeister installed here.
Okay.
But I mainly use right now. I mainly use the SNES Mini and the Famicom Mini to play the games on the big TV.
Okay.
Well, it's fine for me right now, but I have all the old games, and if I'm feeling retro enough, I hook up the old ones to the FrameMeister, switch the profile to the corresponding console. And hours later, I'm ready to play the game.
Oh man, you don't have it permanently set up, huh? That's
well, the FrameMeister is permanently set up, but all the other ones, like the consoles and the games, and so are all spread around the flat and
See, okay.
basement and everywhere.
The trick for me, the thing that solved all of that was using the G-SCART switchers, because they have dual output. So I run one as like a DE15 to BNC for the PVM monitor, and then the other output goes to either the OSSC or the FrameMeister. And so it's always outputting both signals at once. So basically I just flip on the OSSC at the same time as the monitor, and it just goes right to all my capture gear.
Yeah, just another 100 to 200 euros more. What?
Oh, I mean, you can. Oh, you mean the switcher? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, it's absolutely worth it. Although getting it into Germany is a little bit of a pain, because I actually got stopped by the customs guys.
Yeah.
And they were like,
these are our best friends.
They wanted to know what the heck it was. They had no idea. Like, what is this thing? Like, they're so confused by it. I eventually was able to explain it, and they were like, "All right, that's fine."
I was so often when I was living back then in Berlin, as Toby does. I was so often at the custom guys that they had my own personal custom guy who was talking with me about everything I ordered from Japan. And quite interesting what they see every day on their desks and how well informed they are.
Huh. See, what I found is actually ordering stuff from Japan, I've never had an issue with something getting pulled into customs. But if I order anything if anything comes from China, it always gets stopped. And if it comes from America, it often gets stopped, or I end up paying an insane fee. So I don't really order anything from America for that reason. So it's just not worth it.
Yeah, always declare as a gift.
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very gifted.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to cut to something different here, because I'm super interested about what fascinates you about the history and development of games. Because in our podcast, we always try to do like whole series. And like 8 years ago, I was really into going through the whole series before the podcast, actually. Like I played...
Right.
I played stuff like Metal Gear from the MSX original up to 4 in a row, just to talk about it on like a 2-hour podcast. Stuff like that.
I know the feeling.
Yeah. I was really wondering, like, what fascinates you specifically about seeing that development?
All right, I think there's 3 elements that have resulted in me being curious about this stuff and loving it. Firstly, when I was younger, especially, I did a lot of art. I was huge into drawing and painting. I even made an animated film with somebody, and it was not great and a really low frame rate, but it was very short too, because it's hard to do hand drawn animation like that. But I was convinced I wanted to do like animation or something when I got older, but that didn't pan out. I got more into computers then. So my love of animation is like that goes in with appreciation for what artists are achieving in games. So I think that's interesting. And then there's the technical side. I did programming. That was what I studied in college primarily. And then, I did that kind of stuff for a job. So I was interested in the technical side of things, like how you design something to work. So there's the art and the technology together. And then lastly, I don't know how this goes, but I kind of feel like I inherited the historical appreciation from my dad, perhaps, because he is a historian actually, but more on war. But like studying history. Basically, he studies the history of man, you could say, and the different conflicts throughout history, and he has a library's worth of books. It's really impressive. And in that same sense, I've kind of followed his exact trajectory, but with games. So in a way, I kind of feel like a little bit of a game historian, if you will, or like in terms of just what I'm interested in learning about. So all those 3 things came together, and I just find it really fascinating, and I really just love exploring, these old things and just understanding how they were made and the conditions they were made, and also the ephemera around it, just the whole full experience. I think that stuff is really fascinating. And so it personally interests me, which is why I like to try to make videos on this stuff, because I think it's so neat.
Yeah, I mean, there were the console wars, right? That's kind of like historic war.
A little bit, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I was a big member of one of the biggest German forums, web forums, called consolewars.de. So
I was posting on forums since 1999. So
yeah. The times changed. I know, forums are dead. Blah blah blah. But yeah, I think now with this background, I can totally understand some of the backgrounds in your videos, like the one DF Retro episode about the what was it? The Sega racing game
Daytona.
Yeah, the Daytona. I was so impressed, to be honest, about all the details you brought up in the episode, about all the different versions of the game and the development and the differences in all the versions. Well, that kind of killed me, to be honest.
Oh, I hope it didn't kill you.
Yeah, not literally, but
oh yeah.
Well, I was kind of blown away how much detail you brought up in that episode.
That's actually kind of one of my favorite eras of games is the 32-bit generation, I guess you could say. The transition to 3D, because just what it meant for development at the time, and just the number of hoops people had to jump through. And it was like the beginning of 3D rendering, and there wasn't really a lot of established standards, or there wasn't these like, well, this is how you do this. It was all these individual developers and studios and programmers coming up with like ingenious methods for solving their problems. And I think it's so fascinating to see that. And Daytona was interesting to me specifically because they adapted a ridiculously expensive arcade game developed on that ultra powerful bespoke hardware, the Model 2.
Yeah.
They had to figure out how to get that, a game like that with that many cars at that speed running on a Sega Saturn. And that's not
but
easy.
It's also quite interesting and fascinating too that they needed so much time and so much hardware power to translate the arcade version to a home version 1-to-1. Like this took I think more than 10 years, right?
Yeah, I mean, that period was exciting for the arcades, like Sega's Model 2 and Model 3 specifically, because it was like, it's basically like an example of what can you do with 3D rendering at a specific point in time if you essentially have unlimited budget. And that's what they had, basically. It's like, they will throw whatever they need to make the most powerful 3D hardware you could imagine at that time. And that's also why I think Yu Suzuki and his team at AM2, I think they're like during their prime, they were pretty much like the greatest developer that's ever existed, in the sense that they were basically pumping out new genre-defining games on super high-end hardware, that the hardware was made concurrently with the game development and they often did this in like periods of like 9 months. I mean, when you think about how many games that AM2 produced that changed the face of gaming and hardware and everything, and they did it so many times and always in those short periods of time, it's just absolutely insane. Like, we've never seen anything quite like that before or since, really.
Yeah, you're right. And look what Sega has become now.
Yeah, I mean,
the biggest pachinko manufacturer in the world, and the most successful one too.
More than Konami, huh? Ooh, that's a rivalry.
No, it is quite fascinating, to be honest. Even if Sega's out of the game regarding games right now, just having some rights, selling them. But on a hardware perspective, they are quite advanced.
That's true. That is true.
they addicted a whole country with their advanced hardware. Yeah, I mean, Toby, you were like 2 years ago in Japan, in Tokyo. Any
Yes.
impressions from the pachinko industry?
Oh, honestly, we didn't even go near one of those places. I hate loud noises.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's from my perspective, it sounds like an addiction of a whole country. If you look at these places, look inside, and you see all the pale faces of the users. It's not the gamers; it's the users in this case. Well, yeah, impressive.
You know.
Yeah, okay. So, bringing it back.
Sorry for
I want-
the exposition. Sorry.
That was fun.
Yeah, talking about like specific feats in gaming history. Did you have any one that basically inspired the whole DF retro thing for you?
Well, yes, actually. Well, the whole thing was kicked off because of there was like rumors of Shenmue 3 being announced. Or no, it was after. So this was 2016. So Shenmue 3 was a known thing, but we were expecting it to materialize at that E3, which it did not. A year later, so we were like, so it was suggested that I do like a retrospective, looking back at the original Shenmue, and I was like, okay, but I ended up treating it differently, and I did it in like February 2016. And that's the Shenmue episode, but not exactly. The version I initially produced was a little bit different, and I kind of liked it, but I ended up sitting on it for like months, basically. I never finished it, and it was just sat there. And then I guess I finally got a copy of Quake for Sega Saturn, and I was loading that up again, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing for that system. And so on the weekend, I just pumped out like a little 5 or 6 minute video on that. I was like, oh, I'm going to put this up, Richard. He's like, all right. And then, I just called it, I guess, DF Retro. I literally just went into the original source graphic for our logo and just like initially just added retro text to it. Like, all right, let's just do this. I was like, go ahead, put it up. And enough people liked it. I was like, maybe I should finish that Shenmue episode. So I finished that, and then we put that up as well. And then it kind of just became a thing from there because I was happy to finally be able to do that sort of thing. But it really was, it was the Shenmue thing that essentially triggered all of this. So that's kind of the catalyst, you could say.
Shenmue, the origin of everything.
Well, it gets back to our AM2 conversation, Again, Yu Suzuki, he's there.
Yeah, man, I was a Saturn kid, if you can say that, basically. I think too, like that time was very special, especially when I went through all the Metal Gear games, like the second one on the MSX. You can see all the things they had for Metal Gear Solid later. Like almost everything was there, and I think they just perfectly matched it to 3D space.
Oh yeah,
it's crazy.
I always thought it was kind of almost bordering on a remake.
Yeah,
Metal Gear Solid feels like just an evolution or a remake of Metal Gear 2 in a lot of ways. But obviously they went crazy with the they were able to do a filmic style presentation, which was new at the time. Especially in real time. I think doing that sort of scene direction was very uncommon for games at the time. Which is why it stood out.
I think it's also why you can basically play it via the radar only.
Exactly. It's exactly Metal Gear Solid 1 is a 2D game at its heart. It uses 3D graphics, but it is a 2D game, exactly like Metal Gear 2. And
it's a shame that Kojima can't talk English at all. I had the chance to meet him in person years ago, but unfortunately he's not talking English. Maybe he understands it, as most Japanese people do, but they are kind of what's the right term for it? They're
I
ashamed
know
of talking English. I think so, right?
it's more like I get this. I've been through this many times. It's just when you study another language, even if you're fairly okay at it, actually forming good sounding sentences is often difficult. And especially when you're in a situation like that, it can be very stressful. So,
It is.
As you can hear from our sentences right now.
you guys are doing fine. See, exactly.
What I meant to say is that besides meeting him in person, I would like to ask him so many things about the games he made and about the approach he had, even on Metal Gear and on Metal Gear Solid, the newer ones. But from other interviews he gave, which were translated, the style is and his style is the movie style. He wanted to be a movie director and got into games and tried to mix it up. That's his thing.
Yep.
And therefore his games are more or like interactive movies.
That's
at least the newer ones.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it's a perfection of the old FMV craze. Only with actual interaction.
Yeah,
instead of just pressing a button to change things.
Never open up the box of FMV Pandora again, please.
Hey, I was just playing the Japanese dubbed version of Night Trap the other day, and
congratulations,
Slam City with Scottie Pippen. So,
oh god,
that was happening here just a few nights ago. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Okay,
that's how we roll over here. I think I was the only person in. Well, I was going to say the only person in Germany, probably the only person in the world to be playing Slam City that night.
So you would like to think?
Oh, I see.
You can. I think you can probably, or you could probably cross out that night.
Exactly. Who knows if as soon as the Mega SG hits, who knows what's gonna happen?
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I really hope that turns out to be. I'm sure it's going to be great. They've always done good work. Kevin, I've met Kevin. That dude is smart. he's a very good engineer. There's no doubt about it. So I'm sure his work on this will be awesome.
Yeah,
at least he convinced Toby. He bought it. He already pre-ordered.
Oh, excellent! I can't wait to see it. Actually, I think it's going to be nice because the mainly because. Even if you're upscaling stuff, the Mega Drive / Genesis is kind of a landmine field for finding ones with both good video and audio.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get into the modding scene, you can actually kind of fix most of them up, but it's not super simple to get a really nice Genesis / Mega Drive that does everything you need without some sort of issue.
And you need a good cable too, like from the retro gaming cables from the UK. At least one of these should be included in your console.
Exactly. So it can be done, but it's not. There is an appealing idea because there really hasn't been I'm very curious about the sound on that thing more than anything because that's one area that nobody's really gotten right before. Trying to duplicate this system, like every attempt at it has always failed. In terms of hardware, like obviously there's some good emulators on PC, but hardware clones have always been terrible in terms of simulating the sound. So we'll see.
Yeah, I've been trying to get my Saturn up and working. It's a PAL Saturn, so it only does 50 hertz.
Yeah.
And I went through all that stuff with getting the modified cartridge, like the RAM adapter cartridge, to play imports and all that. And then I realized after buying Exhumed, importing that from the UK via eBay, because I really wanted to check that out. I always read about it in magazines back then, and then I saw your video about
it's a great game.
I got all worked up. Oh my god, I saw this back then, and I always wanted to play it and find all the 100 hidden Easter eggs from the developers and stuff like that. And yeah, I tried everything, and then oh man, I can use it with the 3D controller too, so I bought that too.
Yep.
Then I realized the PAL version is is not compatible with the Saturn 3D controller.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard about that later, exactly, because I don't have the PAL version, and I think I saw somebody sent me a message saying, "Oh yeah, the 3D controller doesn't work with the PAL version." It's like, what? But it seems that it was just it
Like,
was
it's
released
obvious,
quite a
right?
bit earlier.
So
It's
I
a bit-
basically I can play the 60 hertz version via that like backup RAM cartridge thing, but it only works in 50 hertz. So I have to get that modded too. Oh man.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's a pain.
Yeah,
Yeah, but,
that's what I meant earlier. You start at one point, investing like 20 euros, whatever, for a new game you always wanted to play on your old hardware. And then you add one stuff, you add another one, new controller, new monitor, like a PVM, new upscaler, new TV.
Well,
And
you
end
know,
up
once you
spending
get
thousands of dollars.
that's fine, but once you have the setup nailed down, though, you're good to go for everything. So
Yeah, for one console.
it's not hard or expensive to get most of them. Although
Yeah.
there's a disadvantage, I guess, if you were into PAL stuff.
Yeah.
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 That whole world is something. Although at least on a PVM you can I don't play much PAL stuff, but when I do, I configured the display mode for 50 hertz to fill the screen properly. So at least I don't have borders on PAL stuff. But that doesn't mean the speed is correct. You know,
Yeah.
that's often a problem.
Imagine growing up with Mario, a
But
fat
slow.
dude, but slow.
No, I know. I talked to some friends over here about that, and like they were actually weirded out. Like when I showed them like Sonic the Hedgehog,
Yeah.
or we were talking about how like you used to play Sonic and the music was slow.
Yeah.
Everybody thought that's how it was. I'm just like, wow.
And Sonic is even slower than Mario.
And they called Sonic fast back in the day in Europe, but when you play the PAL version, it's like, okay, he kind of putters along.
He's even slower than Mario.
Yeah, he's 50 hertz Sonic is slower than 60 hertz Mario.
It is.
Last processing my ass. Talking about all that setup stuff, that also goes into one of my questions. How much time it takes to do something like the Doom retrospective, because you have all those systems, all those different games to set up, and
well, let's see. It depends. DF retro episodes usually take between 2 and 5 days to produce. So Doom took about 5 days, I'd say.
So that's your most extreme example, basically.
Yeah, the most extreme episodes, and most take about that. I wish I had that amount of time for all of them, though. But it's because it does when I'm crunching on them. It can get stressful at the end. Usually, the last day is like a 14-hour day kind of thing. Just crunching through to get it done. And the reality is that it's not like, oh, the boss says you have to. It's more like it's the expectations that I'm setting for myself about the episodes. Like if I scaled down the things, I could do them faster and get them out easier. But when they end up taking that amount of time, it's usually because I really wanted to do it well. So I'm like pushing myself to get it done. And sometimes I go too far. But it's, it's a tricky thing to balance. I have one episode that I've been trying to it's a big one that I need to start soon, but I've been sitting on 8 hours of interview footage for a full year with a lot of different people at a big studio relating to a whole history of a company and a bunch of series. And man, just wrapping my head around the whole thing, it's difficult, but I think I'm going to try to make that in the next month or two. So we'll see how that could take a while.
Okay, sounds very interesting.
So,
Can you spoil us?
Maybe once the podcast recording's done, I'll tell you.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, let's see.
But
So,
you're probably gonna show us some more game series in the future, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. I have so many episodes I want to do. It's ridiculous how many things I would like to do. So thankfully, I always have options. It's just a matter of sitting down. The problem I find is that the games I care the most about require the most amount of work from me. So it takes a lot of time to make those episodes, or more like I said, I can't dedicate that many days to them because of the schedule we keep. So, which means if I put in the time to really do an episode, it's going to be like 4 or 5 days of just constant hard work. So I kind of got to mentally prepare myself for some very rough days to get through it. And I'm always trying to optimize it. And I've gotten pretty good at optimizing, but it's just like, I mean, I have all the systems I need like set up and ready to go. I have all the games ready. Like, it's very easy to get capturing. So that's not a problem. I mean, I can set up and start capturing within like 60 seconds now on like any system. I have all the controllers handy. So that's very good. It's just, I got to capture a bunch of stuff. And depending on the episode, like the 32X episode took a long time. I mean, that actually technically would have been the longest, except for I broke it up into 2 episodes because it was too many games to cover for one. I think I did like 40 games on that one. And
how many games are even out there for the console?
It's about that. I think it's slightly less, but I also covered some homebrew stuff. So
yeah, I thought like it was like 30 games at all, 24 or something like that, right?
No, it's more than that. It's closer to 40.
Okay.
So it's
more like 32, huh?
Actually, so it does seem that there was actually 40 titles. Exactly. Yeah, there's 40 titles for it. 36 in North America, 27 in Europe, and then 18 in Japan. So most of the 32X stuff showed up in America, except for like 4 games, I guess.
Because of all that FMV stuff, I guess.
Yeah, that weird FMV stuff.
There was 5 FMV 32X supported games in America, and then that 6th one got a release in Brazil recently. It was Surgical Strike. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, right. Right now is the time where the PlayStation 2 launched in Brazil.
Oh yeah, we're there.
Yeah, like they're kind of 20 years behind or 15 years behind in release.
Yes and no. I mean, talking to people, the new stuff is available because of
I know, but they have to spend like 100 times more than
basically. If you're rich, you're playing the modern stuff. If you're not, well, hey, it's not that bad. You're playing what we view as retro games, but they're awesome. So it could be worse.
But the situation in China is almost the same. Until up recently, they had some kind of console ban, I think. And so all the manufacturers had to reassemble their consoles into PCs or PC versions to even be able to release them in China. It's kind of weird politics over there.
It is. Well, that's the world.
Yeah, but all the rich kids got obviously got the PlayStation, whatever, Xbox Ones.
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay.
We talked briefly before the podcast about like conventions and stuff like that, and swap meets. I was wondering where you kind of source games nowadays from, because I've been trying to get like through some flea markets in Berlin, but there's like almost nothing.
It's a mix. So online, I use a mix of like Yahoo auctions and like eBay, depending. And I order a lot of stuff from Japan. Actually, I tend to favor that. Locally, I often go to those retro trade shows. And yeah, if you're collecting NTSC stuff, the prices are usually quite reasonable, unless you're talking about the really rare games. So I'm very happy about that. I got an Earthworm Jim special edition there. I think it was like $30 or something in that range. And the US version, And that's a game, by the way, that sells for upwards of like $200
Mm.
normally. So that was quite a deal. I also got Rayman for Sega Saturn, the US version, for €7 at one of
Whoa.
those shops. So
You have to send me some addresses later.
oh, I think the best was when I was living in France before this. I went to a shop in Nancy, and they had on the bottom shelf in the back corner. That's where I got the US version of Power Slave or / Exhumed. And they had that that was €7. And now if you look at the US price, it's a lot higher than that.
Oh, that compensates the time living in France, I think.
Oh. Hey, my wife is French, so
Oh,
no, just kidding.
great!
It is true, but
We have to cut that out, Toby.
where we were living in France wasn't my favorite, but where she's from I like. So
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Very interesting.
I actually have a very small story I wanted to add because
Sure.
I think it might amuse you too.
okay.
When I was like around 13 years old, I went to England for a school exchange. I was near Manchester, and back then I didn't know about all those differences about consoles in other regions and stuff like that. But I went to a department store there, and I saw Doom for Sega Saturn on the shelf.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, and I was like, oh my god, I can buy it here. It's it's legal, and I was so happy, and I brought it home, and I actually even came close to finishing it on the Sega Saturn. And like years later, I saw your episode, and I thought, man, yeah, that was shit. I didn't even know back then.
Yeah, it's real bad for sure. If you go back to Richard's old magazine, UK, that he used to write, do the issue of Sega Saturn magazine with Doom in it, they absolutely blasted it, rightfully so. It's a really bad port, but again, knowing what we know now, it's not entirely the fault of the developer. So
No, the
No.
system also limits the capabilities of the game.
no, it was Jim Bagley, who's a really great coder and a super nice fellow. He's doing the port, and this is their story. So he originally was doing a hardware rendered version using the Saturn's VDPs more, taking more advantage of them. But because of that, they were, it's using like distorted quads, you could say, as Saturn does, which causes some distortion on walls, of course, right? It's not affine texture warping like PlayStation. It's different because of the way Sega Saturn draws its quads. But so normally, apparently, John Romero at id Software was the guy that would approve ports for people or like be the approval guy. But it just so happens that when Jim submitted the Doom build, John Romero was on vacation. And
I thought he was already out.
Oh no! This was before. This was before he left. They were still working on Quake, Quake 1, I think.
So who approved it?
They submitted it, and it was John Carmack that looked
shit.
at it. And Carmack, of course, he's a much pickier man, and he was not happy with the texture swimming, understandably. And he basically told them they had to change it. So Jim had to recode the game to essentially run, you could say, in software mode. It's basically running entirely on the CPUs. So he's like, couldn't really fully utilize the Saturn, and the Saturn CPUs are not well suited for that. They had to draw Doom more like closer to the PC, I guess you could say, I'd imagine, which it's just not fast enough at. And what's funny about it, though, is years later on Twitter, if you look, John Carmack actually said that he made the wrong choice then, and if he would have done it again, he would have told him to use VDP 1 and 2 properly and just ship with the warped textures just for the speed. So he actually did admit that he was at fault for that decision.
Well, at least
back in the day, in hindsight.
Yeah. In hindsight,
so that's cool. He understands. I can understand because it did look different, I'm sure, but still, with the way that the Saturn renders things, it would have been much better though, at a high frame rate with a little bit of texture warping.
Okay.
So yeah, interesting.
I actually went back and looked at quite a few of those N64 ports, like Doom 64.
Oh, I love those.
and
Yeah,
Quake. Quake actually plays really well.
yeah. Quake
I-
64 is a really good conversion. It's quite nice.
especially with that filter off. And
Well, that's actually one. If you get the N64 RGB mod, or you can get the HDMI one, but I'm using the analog one. I only use it on my CRT, but they actually have a hardware deblur function, and so does the HDMI mod. And if you turn off the hardware deblur, or you use hardware deblur, it basically produces the same result that you get in Quake, where you turn off the filter, the VI filter, I guess. You get that on every game. So by switching deblur on, you get much sharper image quality across the whole N64 library, which is why I think a modded 64 is kind of essential if you're playing N64.
I was able to get one modded with a simple RGB board, but I didn't go for the deblur stuff. It was just too expensive. Sadly.
It does make a massive difference, though. It really does. So much better looking with that feature. I find like it's so bizarre, like how much worse it looks when using that blur. I'm not entirely certain. I mean, I think they were trying to simulate the appearance of like smooth aliasing free images at the expense of like blur, but there's basically like two levels of anti-aliasing on N64. There's the hardware and then I guess like the software blur, you could say. I can't think of the best way to describe them off the top of my head, but if you use deblur and then you use an EverDrive, you can also input some codes to disable the software blur, and that's like the anti-aliasing essentially. So N64 really did actual like real anti-aliasing, which is kind of nuts when you think about it, because the consoles after did not do that at all. But if you turn that off and you turn off deblur, you end up with image quality that actually looks closer to PlayStation, where everything's, the edges are very sharp, very harsh. It looks very different. I mean, the textures are still filtered, but all the polygon edges are very, very sharp, but perhaps too much so. So I like using just deblur, but leaving the anti-aliasing on. And that's the N64 podcast. So
yeah, right now we're diving deep into N64 technology. And just while looking at Toby, I see the numbers counting above his head to buy another N64 with a proper RGB mod.
Yes. The thing that sucks about N64 is it's the one system that's very difficult to mod for if you want to play PAL and NTSC games.
Yeah.
Because you basically have to I think it's include 2 BIOSes in there or something, or you have to physically switch between 2 chips, I believe. Something like that. I haven't done it because I don't have any PAL games, but it's kind of a pain. Where the other region lock, the difference between Japan and American games is literally just tabs that you remove.
Yeah.
In the system. If you remove those tabs in an American system, then Japanese games work just fine. So it was literally just a physical thing, kind of like the Super NES. But the European PAL version, oof, that's a very different beast.
Yeah, the only European version you can use at all is the French version, right? One of the first production lines.
For the RGB mod?
Yeah, for the RGB mod.
Oh, no. So I know what you're talking about, but that's a different thing. That's a different mod, and that's right, for that mod, yes. But I think for the actual N64 RGB from Tim Worthington, I think it's Tim that did it. His board, I think it works in most, if not all, N64s. Okay. I need to double check that, but I'm fairly sure. I'm like 99% positive that it should work in any system, as it works differently than that other mod. So this
screams for an N64 DF Retro episode,
yeah, I've covered it before. But yeah, someday. System episodes are a huge pain to produce, but I do like to do them. The next one still, I swear, it's going to be the Jaguar. I've already captured most of the games for to actually sit down and come up with a script.
I think the last thing I really want to know is, do you have like that one game you really, really dislike? Like it haunts your nightmares, basically.
The tricky one, because I don't want to say I dislike any game to the degree that it haunts me, because everything produced, there's usually like some real craftsmanship put into it. The game I'm right now that I'm not very fond of, but is also technically very impressive, and they've done an amazing job with it. It's just not for me. Is something like Fortnite. It's just it's not for me. It disappoints me with what's happened with the shift at Epic Games and everything. But to be honest, good for them. It's making them good money. They're doing well, and Unreal. And I'm sure developing Fortnite's helped them with Unreal and optimizing for their platform. So it's done good. It's done some good, but I also, I guess it's almost a little bit hipster to be like, well, it's too popular for me.
But the original presentation from Cliffy back then?
Yeah.
When he first showed the game, I was like really interested in the game, like the base building and all the team working stuff.
It never appealed to me, mainly because I always thought it was weird that the first showpiece, pseudo showpiece title for Unreal Engine 4 was that. So I was like, that doesn't look great. But it's just the style they went for, and technically they're doing some amazing stuff. Like seeing that game running on a phone at 60 frames per second is kind of nuts. I'm not gonna lie. So they've done some amazing work there, and the engineers have done great.
It's the same with PUBG right now. It's like it's blowing you away. How much power lies in the phone version, and how smooth the phone version
difference
works.
Though is the phone version of PUBG is a very different game. It's not the PC client. Whereas with the phone version of Fortnite, they are basically running the same game. It's just they've made some changes to it, but it's the same code base. It's the same game. It's not a special mobile version. It's the same thing, and that's why that's impressive to me. Because in PUBG's case, they literally coded a mobile version that's very different. It's not the Unreal Engine 4 full-blown version of the game. It's a mobile-specific version. So,
I played Fortnite when it came out back then.
Yeah.
We played it co-op with I think 4 players, maximum players for a team. And everybody who's talking right now of the game is talking about the Battle Royale mode of the game, because that's what everyone's playing. And I think nobody remembers that the game and not the Battle Royale mode is a completely different game. It's fascinating. That's basically a special mode of the game, or what is it, like a game mode is more popular. It's almost the same thing as with Counter-Strike and what was it, Half-Life Deathmatch back then, right? Counter-Strike was so much more popular.
That's right. Than the deathmatch,
the multiplayer version of Half-Life than the game itself. And so, like, no one remembers the original Half-Life Deathmatch online multiplayer, whatever.
That's true.
Versions.
Yeah, I used to play that too. Hold on. Actually, now unrelated. So if we rewind a second here, I have thought of a game that I truly, truly despise. It's a game so bad that I almost it's Trevor McFur and the Crescent Galaxy for the Atari Jaguar. A game so bad that when I had to capture and play that, I put the controller down and I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't want a Jaguar episode. I was just I was about to just end it there and be like, you know what? No, I don't want to do this. But I pushed on, and there's some good stuff on the Jag. But man, that game is so bad. And when you look at like what it launched against at the time, it's hideous. It has no music during gameplay. The gameplay itself is garbage. Like everything about all the background art, and this is partially due to a Jaguar hardware thing, but it all looks like it uses JPEG compression. So you're looking at these ugly pre-rendered sprites and backgrounds that are all like super compressed with very little parallax, and it's this ugly, slow, boring, like no style like just a piece of garbage. But at the same time, again, like as far as I know, like the situation regarding development of that was very tough for those guys. So it's a miracle that they actually finished it. But I really think that launching that as an Atari Jaguar launch game, that's the kind of thing that probably helps sync the system. Because if you've had something like Gradius 3 on Super NES, even with the slowdown, you had that at launch years prior, and then you see something like Trevor McFur, which looks like Mike. I mean, have you guys seen this game? Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, actually, no.
I'll have to send you a link, because this thing, it's this. Well, you see how I'm getting flustered here just thinking about Trevor McFur, man. It's a nightmare. It is a bad game.
I'm looking it up right now.
Trevor McFur in the Crescent Galaxy.
Yeah. It's like you only have to hit Trevor into the Google search console and it comes up first.
Yes.
Right now. Okay, let's see.
It's very great for an audio podcast, as always.
Video on the podcast. But you're getting that experience of Trevor McFur in the Crescent Galaxy.
I'm sure we can include that on Patreon as a thumbnail.
Yeah, sure. Why not? Even we can even include a link to a YouTube video. Why not? Well, it looks to be honest, it looks like a side-scrolling shoot 'em up from the Macintosh in the early 90s.
It does kind of look like that.
It totally looks like it. I was used to playing these kinds of games.
Don't you dare mock them.
No, it looks perfectly fine for me, but I can totally understand if you invested in a Jaguar and has had this game as a launch title.
You gotta remember that this was like 1993. There were a lot of really good shooters on consoles at that point, right?
Yeah,
like
sure.
Maybe not on the Mac, on computers and such. It's fair. The hardware wasn't even that well designed for necessarily at the time.
Yep.
But console, man, I mean, there was really good stuff out there.
It was like their USP, like to have side-scrolling shoot 'em ups.
Yeah. There was amazing shooters on it, and one of the hallmarks of those shooters is, of course, music as well, like soundtrack. And to launch something like this with a system when you're saying 64-bit power, and, you're like hyping this thing up as like, oh, you used to play these children's toys, now step up to the real thing, that kind of attitude. And then there's this. It's just, you got to wonder what they're thinking. And there was one of two shooters at launch. The other one was a port of Raiden, the vertical shooter.
Mm.
And it's an okay port. It runs at half the frame rate, and it's kind of squashed looking, but it's still it's a good game. But this one is just bad.
It remembers me of a first semester Games Academy project.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It looks like a student project. Now, to be fair, of course, writing this for the Jag would have meant a lot of assembly code, right? I'd assume. So it's a little bit more hardcore maybe back in the day, writing for all those Jaguar. The Jaguar architecture is very bizarre. I mean, technically, I guess you can cheap out and just, mostly write for the 68,000, the Motorola CPU, which I think a lot of games actually did, rather than use Tom and Jerry, which are the other two chips in there, and the DSP and all that. But yeah, it was a multi-chip monster. That's a crazy machine. But Trevor McFur is not a game that takes advantage of it.
They didn't do the math.
They failed to do the math, or more, I really wish there was an easy way to sort of look at how the games are using the system, like which aspects of it. Because, like, I know, like, the port of Doom to the Jag also has no music, annoyingly. And John Carmack has said that the reason is that the Jaguar didn't have really dedicated sound hardware, but it had a DSP, so you could do sound with that. And in the case of Doom, he had to use the DSP for collision detection. So he was kind of like, well,
it sounds like a Carmack thing.
You get collision detection or you get music. take your pick. It's like, well, I guess I could do without collision detection. Why not?
It totally
Then
sounds
you-
like Carmack. Yeah.
Can't you input a cheat and just disable like no clip, and then you have sound? That would be great.
Exactly. It's like you can play with music, but I would have been okay
Yeah.
with that.
Wonderful. I don't
So,
know,
yeah.
Toby. If you're asking this question, you would have a game in your mind, right?
Yeah, for me it's always like gameplay related, especially when I'm trying to finish a game, because I'm not like a completionist, but I at least try to finish each game. And I think the worst one was Evil Within on the Xbox One when it came out originally.
Really?
Yeah, I actually counted my deaths because my
Wow.
roommate was with me, and she was watching me, and she was making jokes about it, and I think I had like a death a minute or something like that.
I remember it being challenging, but not that hard, to be honest. I don't remember it being much harder than like a Resident Evil game.
There was this kitchen level where like everything kills you. You take 2 steps on the right on the wrong side, and then
Weird.
start again.
I remember playing the game, but I didn't finish it at all.
I
went, like,
definitely
half
did
through.
finish it, but I liked it. I thought it was pretty good, except for the performance was bad.
I don't know. Maybe I was very unlucky, but I counted quite a few bugs actually. Like there was this one scene where a garage door kept opening and closing, and people behind it firing at you, and it was nearly impossible not to get hit. Like I would go up, the thing would open, they would fire on me, I can't hit them, and then it would close again, and I'm almost dead. And there was the whole scene back and forth,
Man,
like for 20 minutes.
I don't even remember that. I do know that game, the on disc version of the game is in really bad shape.
Yeah.
Like, it's obviously got patched, but the version that shipped on the disc was woof. Because I remember a friend of mine actually bought it as well, and he didn't have his console connected to the internet, so he was playing right off the disc. And he was talking about all these problems. I was like, what are you even talking about?
I might have done that. I might have done that.
He likes to live dangerously without updates, huh?
I prefer when games don't need them, but realistically,
I prefer the games with their launch day updates of 80 gigabytes plus. Like swapping out the whole complete game on first day.
that's always a wonderful time. Always fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, for me, just to get the whole picture, for me, it's one of the Game Boy games I remember. I think it's Terminator 2, where I couldn't get past the first level.
Oh, Terminator 2 for Game Boy.
Yeah, for Game Boy. I think it's Terminator 2 or even Terminator 1. I don't remember correctly. The first level is it has to be 2. You're playing in the future as a Terminator, I think, and you have
on
these
the battlefield,
flying, yeah, on the battlefield, and you have these flying Terminators. I don't know what they're called. Let's call them flying Terminators. These giant ships with their turbo laser cannons on the sides.
Okay,
and you advancing while going to the right side and shooting everything up you see, but you can't progress in the game. And I was playing this game when I was 8 or 7 years old, and I only remember playing the first level. I couldn't get past the first one because I could not understand what you had to do, what you had to achieve to advance in the game. And so the game for me consists of the first level. And I think 2 or 3 years ago, I watched a YouTube video about the game, where the protagonist, the guy playing the game, describing what the problem is in the first level, because you have to not shoot up the enemies, but kind of activate some radio signal or something, and then the real game starts. And well, to be honest, the rest of the game is kind of boring. The first level is the best one in the game. And so it's a mixed impression for me for the game.
I think it was published by LGN even,
Sounds like it.
which has
So-
you know.
But to I know everyone talks about RGN and how bad their games are, but I had the Spider-Man game for the Game Boy, and it was quite good at the time. The first
Well, I think the first Spider-Man game was actually I need to. What was the Amazing Spider-Man, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Spider-Man for Game
that-
Boy,
that-
amazing.
Yeah, it was published by LGN, but it was also developed by Rare.
Yeah, okay.
So
Okay.
that's why.
That's why.
So I'm saying.
Okay, let's get on the same level as LJN's mainly shit. Okay,
I mean, LGN really. I mean, they're mostly just a publisher, right? So it's kind of like.
but they develop games too, right? Not only
Yeah, I
publish them.
think they did, but they published a lot of stuff too, and they generally picked up a lot of bad stuff. But obviously, in that case, they managed to get a Rare game, which is, hey,
Yeah, okay.
pretty great.
To their defense. Okay.
Actually, since we're back on Game Boy again, I would like to make this a final question.
Okay.
Since we're already talking about Link's Awakening,
Yes.
and the Nintendo Direct happened recently with the remake.
Okay.
I was really wondering what you think of that footage. Like, it wasn't a lot, but it featured the new style for the game. And like,
I'm pretty open-minded to this thing. It looks neat. It looks different, and I'm curious to see where they go with it. So, I mean, it's not like you look at it and be like, "Wow, that's amazing."
yeah,
But I think it looks nice. I think it looks nice enough, and I was never really bothered with style changes, to be honest, because it doesn't mean the original still exists if you want that. So it's kind of cool to see a new interpretation of it. My only concern, though, is that the trailer, even though the direct was shown at 60 frames per second, that specific trailer, everything was at 30. I'm a little concerned that it's going to run at 30 frames per second, which would be a step down from A Link Between Worlds on 3DS, which was a 60 FPS game. And for a game like Zelda, I really think a high frame rate or 60 FPS is really important because there's a lot of lateral motion. The scrolling, overhead games, the screen is going to be moving a lot. Not so much on the original Game Boy because it's screen by screen. It would scroll between them, even though that was still a 60 FPS game on Game Boy. But it looks like they're doing more scrolling like a typical Zelda game in this remake. And yeah, if it's only 30, it's going to feel kind of chunky and not very responsive. So I really hope that they actually do go for 60.
I really hope they can capture the whole, I don't know, experience, because back then I really was moved by the game, even at a younger age. I don't know, I thought the whole ending with the island disappearing, that was really one of the first moments where I thought like, oh my god, this is so sad.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, even as a kid though, I was thinking about weird technical limitations. So I remember one thing that always bothered me about Game Boy games is that so few of them use the equivalent of slopes, right? And nowadays I look at that and I think it's more like a cart memory limitation, because the cart ROMs are very small, and doing slopes just means you have more tiles, graphics tiles, of course. So that's more to store on the ROM chip, and I can see why they would cut that. But A Link to the Past and Super NES, they used a lot of tiles to create different shapes, whereas Link's Awakening, every wall in that game, everything is 90-degree angles, so it's always flat walls, right? It's a small thing, but that was something that added a lot to A Link to the Past and Super NES, was because you had the equivalent of slopes where the terrains and borders of the levels would move around in the different way. And same with all the Mario games and everything, because the Mario Land games never had slopes, they were also flat. But there are games with slopes on the Game Boy, just not that many. And then I felt like that was something that would continue to haunt them, because when they released the first Mario Maker, I couldn't believe they launched it without slopes, because it meant that you couldn't create Mario 3 or Mario World, any of those levels properly, because that was key to the design. It wasn't an option. So when they revealed Mario Maker 2, I did chuckle because the very first thing they showed was slopes.
Slopes.
I was like, all right, they did it. They listened. So that it'd be interesting to see if slopes ended up in the remake of Link's Awakening. I mean, it's okay if they don't because it's not part of the original level design. Still, if they expanded it, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, you have Mario characters in there, so who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Anything could happen.
I'm a weirdo concerning Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
I hadn't been able to get the game at its release back then.
Okay.
But I was able to play it with the DX version, and I loved it.
Cool.
It was fantastic for me, and was the first time for me playing the game. But back when the original one was released, I only had the chance to read the magazines about the game, and while playing the DX version, I was like so into it. Without ever had the chance to play it, but have read all the magazine stories and the guides about the game, the walkthroughs.
Right.
It was 2 days, or more like 2 nights playing the game, finishing it. I was blasted away, and even with the additional dungeon, was fantastic for me back then. Even in 1989 or when it was released, the DX version, I can't remember.
1998 or 99, I think. Yeah. So actually, one thing that reminds me though is, which is that what I had, there was a sort of a, I don't actually remember if it's considered a glitch. I'm sure it is actually. Essentially, when you would, the whole world was broken up into screens, and you would hit the edge of the screen and it would scroll over to the next screen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as you hit the border of a screen, if you would hit like select or something to bring up your inventory, and then you hit select again, when you would come back to the game, Link would transport to the other side of the screen. So if you were entering on the left and you hit select, when you get out of the menu, Link would then be on the right of the screen, right? So you were basically warping across the screen. And what that allowed you to do is get to places you should not be. So you could go to weird spots on the island that were broken or didn't go anywhere, or you could like skip right to like very late dungeons because they were often blocked by barriers that required items that you needed to get. But you could just use that trick to basically just warp past the barrier and just go right into the dungeon. And that was one of my first experiences of like really messing the game and like making it kind of break and like trying like understanding like, wait a minute, some of the design, because you could just do that anywhere. And it absolutely just destroyed the pacing and the scripting. Like the game's like was designed to, all the triggers that the game relied on normally. Once you break the sequence there, of course, they don't occur as they should, or they occur in a weird order. And I, as a kid, I thought that was hilarious and weird. But they've of course removed that from later versions. So
really,
yeah,
like all the screen scrolling too. Unfortunately for you, cheater.
Yeah, no, that was I don't even remember how I figured that out. I think it was just an accident or something at the time because back then there's no internet or just friends and playing it together, and we were all playing the game.
Yeah, I remember calling the Nintendo support on various times when I was stuck in games. They were always very helpful.
And would talk as slowly as possible.
Yeah, that was the other thing. Like, not that cheap, huh?
Yes, it's like, yes, I am very happy to help you. So what? Yeah,
that's €3. Okay. I see. Even if Toby mentioned that was his last question.
Oh, you asked away. It's fine.
On the end of the list, there's another one. It's like OLED, LCD, LED. So what do you prefer?
Oh, I use OLED.
Yeah.
I only have LCD for my computer monitors. My main TV is an OLED. Our downstairs TV is a Pioneer Plasma. And then I have the CRTs. So I pretty much stay away from LCDs.
So you have one of the Kuro plasmas?
Yes, I have that downstairs. I've had that since 2008. It still works
Yeah.
great. And then my
It's
main screen up
fantastic.
here
The
is
Kuros are the best thing you could buy back then.
yeah, and I even I ended up modding mine sort of because I had the standard one, and later I purchased the Elite board. It was just for the Elite version, and it used the same glass and everything, so you could just take the back off and essentially swap the boards, and you could get the extra functions and features of the Elite. The only thing you had to do was like drill a hole in the metal shield on the back because it had an extra. There was an extra output or something on the Elite board that you would basically cover up otherwise, and it didn't. So yeah, I had to take the back of the TV off and then use my tools to drill a hole in the right spot, which first, of course, required figuring out the measurements so I knew where to drill. So that was kind of a hacky thing, but in the end, it worked great. And that Elite board it's an awesome thing, and it's still in there today. Works great.
So I'm imagining you right now hiding all the electricity bills from your wife, right?
Oh no, she manages them, and they are.
And she never asked you why you're paying double for the plasma TV.
Well, she knows. I mean, actually, I don't use the plasma.
She uses it.
Upset. No, actually, our son uses it. He plays tons of. I basically gave him my original Xbox One, the launch unit, and he plays tons and tons of Roblox on there.
Okay.
So, and also we finished Halo together, which was cool. But
yeah,
but Roblox, baby. And it shows how confident I am in that plasma's inability. You can't really burn that plasma. It doesn't have burn-in issues. And so he plays on there all the time with the same things on screen for hours, and it's not burnt in. It's no problems. I'm not sure what they did actually to make that work, but it's never been a problem on that one. So
okay.
I moved from an LG plasma directly to OLED, so
that's good.
I'm all the way there with you.
One thing I like is I originally had a smaller OLED, and I got the 65-inch recently, or last summer. The last year's model, and then the new one's coming up. They've added black frame insertion as a standard feature, and that has been a tremendous thing. Because the one complaint I had with OLEDs previously was because they were using sample and hold still, you ended up you got a little bit of motion blur, specifically on 2D side-scrolling games. When they scroll quickly, it's not as clear as a plasma, right? And that always bothered me. But with black frame insertion, you get very near plasma. So playing games like Sonic Mania on that thing with BFI turned on is excellent. It's much, much sharper. But the downside to it is, of course, because it's essentially inserting a blank frame every other frame at 100, so the image becomes slightly dimmer than normal. But it's still, even with that on, it's brighter than a plasma, but obviously it's not as bright as normal. But it's an interesting feature, so it's definitely something to look for.
That's like the LED flashing stuff you can do with some monitors.
Exactly.
On
it's
PC,
it's the exact same idea. And that's really the only motion blur sample and hold display. So yes, LCDs do that too. Modern LCDs actually have gotten to be pretty good now, but they still natively don't do the dark black levels.
No.
They have to rely on dynamic trickery to get there. Lots of dimming, and and even with a huge grid of LEDs, you still get some blooming, and sometimes there's issues with accuracy. I mean, the best test is a movie with like a huge star field in it. That is torture for those LCDs. Not torture, but it kind of reveals some of the flaws.
Yeah.
And so and I don't like having to rely, and OLED is the first display to get true absolute black, because the Kuro plasma is not that dark, not at all. I mean, it was very dark for its day, but if you look at it
in comparison to all the other plasma TVs back then, it's the darkest thing possible you could buy.
Exactly, it's the darkest plasma, and it was darker than every LCD. It had the best black levels for years. But if you looked at it in a dark room with all the lights off, you could still see that it was obviously glowing, which doesn't happen at all with OLED. Or just
9,000 degree hot hot gas, so something has to glow in it.
Exactly. Yeah. And yeah, that thing is warm. Let's just put out some heat.
Yeah, and the electricity bill,
Yeah, they don't. They're not the most efficient displays. I will say that much.
Well,
So,
Toby, you have any other questions?
yeah, please ask away. Whatever.
While we
Actually,
have him,
not
while we
really.
have him here.
No, I think that about wraps all my questions up for today.
All right. The Inquisition is complete.
Exactly. And I hope you did expect it.
Yes, this one was expected. This Inquisition was in fact scheduled.
Well, I think it sounds fantastic to have all the insights of your gaming setups, your favorite games, your least favorite games, well, most disliked games, and
McFur.
and also the little bits of your personal life too.
Yes.
We really appreciate to learn something from you, and to get information, because not only your Dear Retro episodes are enlightening to most of the people outside, well, in the internet. I think what comes with it is that your fans and everyone else likes to know more about you and your dedication towards games and towards your and their hobbies.
Yes, excellent.
At least that counts for both of us, for Tobias and me. So we have to very thank you for the interview and for your time today.
But of course.
Toby has to say something else, I think.
No, very much. Thank you for your time
Yeah,
today.
of course. No problem at all.
And I guess with that, I'll say this was another great episode of our podcast. And goodbye to all of you out there.